In the red heart of Australia, where the sun rises over ancient lands and the air carries the voices of ancestors, lies a story that still haunts the nation. This is not a tale of gold rush fortunes or outlaw legends. It is a story of children stolen from their families, of cultures torn apart, of policies designed not to protect but to erase. This is the story of the stolen generations. For more than 60,000 years, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples lived in harmony with this ancient land. Every river was a lifeline, every mountain a guardian, every desert a memory. The land was not just soil and stone, it was alive with spirit. Across the continent, hundreds of languages and dialects were spoken, each carrying the knowledge of ancestors. These were not just words, but songlines, living maps that connected people to their country, guiding them through deserts, across waters, and back to sacred sites. To speak was to remember. To sing was to keep the world alive. Communities thrived under a complex system of law and kinship, far older than the pyramids of Egypt, far deeper than the empires of Rome. Elders taught the young through ceremony, dance, and dreaming stories, not written on paper, but etched into memory and land itself. To the outside world, this life was a mystery. But to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, it was everything: identity, belonging, survival, and spirit woven together in a tapestry older than time itself. That world changed forever in 1788, when the first fleet dropped anchor in Sydney Cove. With the arrival of the British, two worlds collided, one tens of thousands of years old, the other driven by empire and expansion. The settlers did not understand, nor did they respect, the laws of the First Nations. To them, the land was empty, terra nullius, a place to be claimed, fenced, and farmed. But for Aboriginal peoples, this was an unthinkable theft. As land was seized, communities were driven from their country. Resistance was met with force. Violence, massacres, and dispossession scarred generations. Alongside the guns came new diseases: smallpox, influenza, measles, illnesses that swept through clans with devastating speed. Whole nations were lost within decades. Yet, even after this devastation, an even more destructive force was waiting. A policy not aimed at the land, but at the very heart of culture: the children. Narrator. By the late 1800s, many in government and church circles believed Aboriginal people would eventually die out. They called them a dying race. The solution they proposed was assimilation. They argued that children with lighter skin could be absorbed into white society, their Aboriginal identity erased within a few generations. This was not compassion. It was control. It was cultural genocide. And it was written into law. Across Australia, government officials and welfare officers were given power to remove Aboriginal children from their families. Sometimes they came with police. Sometimes they came at dawn, dragging children from their mother's arms. In other cases, parents were tricked, told their children would receive an education or better opportunities. Once taken, most were never returned. For the parents, it was a living nightmare, the sound of their children's cries echoing as wagons and trucks carried them away. The children were placed in government institutions, missions run by churches, or foster homes with white families. Life there was harsh. They were often forced to work from a young age. Boys were trained to be farmhands and stockmen. Girls were sent to white households as domestic servants. They were punished for speaking their language. They were forbidden to practice culture or tradition. Their names were changed. Their identities were rewritten. Many endured cruelty, neglect, and abuse. What was taken was not only family, but culture, community, and spirit. For those left behind, the mothers, the fathers, the grandparents, the pain was unimaginable. Some never laid eyes on their children again. Others spent the rest of their lives searching, walking from mission to mission, station to station, asking for news that rarely came. Entire communities buckled under the silence of missing voices. Ceremonies could not be completed, songs of ancestry went unsung, and the knowledge that once flowed between generations was severed. What remained was not only grief, but a wound carved deep into the heart of Aboriginal Australia, a wound that still bleeds across time. The scale of the tragedy is almost beyond comprehension. From the late 1800s until as late as the 1970s, government officials, missionaries, and police carried out the removal of children on a massive scale. Tens of thousands of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children were taken from their families. Some historians believe as many as 1 in 3 children were affected. Imagine walking through a community where nearly every second child is gone. Homes silent, mothers grieving, elders unable to pass down knowledge. This was not an isolated event, but a nationwide policy that left deep scars across Aboriginal Australia. For many who grew up in institutions or white families, adulthood brought painful questions. Who am I? Where do I belong? They often carried 2 worlds inside them, too Aboriginal for white society, too white for the community they had been taken from. Some never found their families again. Others returned only to discover their parents had passed away. Identity, belonging, love, all were fractured. And yet, despite everything, culture endured. In quiet corners of missions and camps, elders whispered stories to children in the dark, keeping the old knowledge alive. Songs were still sung softly under the night sky, dances carried on in hidden gatherings, and languages, though threatened, survived in fragments, passed hand to hand like precious fire. Families who had been torn apart searched, reunited, and rebuilt where they could. Survival was not only a matter of the body, but of spirit, a defiance against erasure. Through resilience, Aboriginal people proved that their identity could not be stolen. By the mid-20th century, Aboriginal activists began to speak louder. Leaders like William Cooper, Charles Perkins, and many others demanded justice. Survivors began telling their stories. The wider Australian public, many of whom had believed the removals were for protection, began to see the truth. In 1997, the landmark, Bringing Them Home, report documented the stories of hundreds of survivors. It revealed the devastating impact of the policies, shining a light on decades of silence. In February 2008, Australia paused. In a historic moment, Prime Minister Kevin Rudd stood before the nation's parliament and delivered an official apology to the stolen generations. He said, "We apologize for the laws and policies of successive parliaments and governments that have inflicted profound grief, suffering, and loss." Across the country, survivors wept. Families embraced. For some, it was healing. For others, it could never be enough. Because an apology, while powerful, cannot undo a century of stolen childhoods. Today, the legacy of the stolen generations remains. Families remain broken. Trauma echoes through children and grandchildren, passed down like an unwanted inheritance. But alongside the pain is resilience. Aboriginal voices are louder than ever. Culture is being revived. Languages are being taught again. Ceremonies are being celebrated proudly. The story of the stolen generations is no longer hidden. It is remembered, it is taught, it is carried forward as both a warning and a reminder. The stolen generations are not only a story of loss, they are a story of survival. They prove that even when governments tried to erase identity, even when families were torn apart, even when children were stripped of language, land, and love, the spirit of a people endured. The voices of the past now speak in the present, never forgotten. Never again.